make sense. There's nowhere on these pyramids that it says, I built this for my tomb. I was born then and I died then. You think if you build such a great monument, at least you put your name on it. There's no hieroglyphs inside the pyramid. And Lord knows that the Egyptians put hieroglyphs everywhere. So why didn't they not write inside the pyramids? You know, so those are all huge contradiction to the concept that the Egyptians or the Mayans or the Incas or the Chinese or so on built their pyramids. You know, that's all logical. Pyramids were not tombs. Pyramids were not built by Egyptians. No Egyptian text talks about the Egyptian building the pyramids. The texts do talk about monuments, enormous monuments being built. And who they say built them was the sun god. The Mayans, the Incas, the Chinese, the Japanese, all cultures that have these buildings, none of them say we built it. All of them say the sun gods taught us how to build, how to talk, how to write, how to do all this stuff. This is an ancient symbol that was found on a granite pillar in Abydos, Egypt, in a temple called the Osirian Temple. Why is it that this object, this drawing, which is on the 100-ton pink pillar in the middle of that temple, is not in any picture books or history books anywhere or archaeologic books anywhere? It took me 10 years of research to go through all the books that were written on the Osirian Temple, from the first papers that were published from the archaeologists that found the temple to eventually, you know, all the papers and the books that were written. None of them had this picture in it. The way I got this picture is that a friend of mine went out there and took it. Okay? Why is it that this picture is not in there? I'll tell you why. Because this graphic is not carved into the rock. It's not etched into the rock. This graphic is actually burnt, laser burnt, into the atomic structure of that pillar. Now when you think of ancient civilization 5,000 years ago, you don't expect them to be doing laser burn on, you know, hard surfaces at high levels of accuracy. Okay? Archaeologists have a really hard time explaining these things. When they can explain something, usually the tendency is not to popularize it. So they leave it out. Some of these symbols that are in the Osirian temple, there's no writing in all of that temple. Not one piece of writing. All there is these things. There's a few of them. Some of them are chipped. Well, the laser burn is through the rock. So that actually, even if you chip it, it still appears on the rock. We have no current technology to reproduce this. That's why you don't find this in history books. The other thing is that the Osirian temple is 50 feet below all the other temples at Abydos. The archaeologists tried to say, oh, the Egyptians dug 50 feet and then started building. Well, the Egyptians never did that to any other building. And actually, when the geologists went there, they went, no, that's not the case. The building was there, and sedimentation piled up beside it. Well, when they calculate how long it would take to get 50 feet of sedimentation, that temple is no longer 4,000 to 5,000 years old. That temple is 9,000 to 12,000 years old. Maybe 10,000 years old. That's why archaeologists really don't like that temple. In fact, they very rarely discuss it. The Sphinx. Most people think that the Sphinx is built. The Sphinx is not built. The Sphinx was carved. The Sphinx was carved right out of the enclosure of the Giza Plateau. Now, when you look at the paws of the Sphinx, you might notice that there's like brick-like structures on it, so it looks like it's built. Those are repairs that were done later in history. But the Sphinx was carved, and actually there's evidence that the head of the Sphinx was recarved. It used to be a lion's head, but it was recarved into a pharaoh's head by one of the pharaohs. However, there is erosion patterns on the Sphinx that is a telltale sign that the Sphinx had to be carved when there was a lot of rain hitting it because of the erosion on it. We know when the last time this area had a lot of rain, and that was approximately 10,000 years ago, which matches the Osirian temple at Abydos. These blocks here consist of the Sphinx temple. They're the blocks that were removed from the side of the Sphinx to carve the Sphinx out. Now, if you were removing blocks from the Sphinx enclosure to build a temple in front with the blocks, would you use a 100-pound block, 500-pound block, maybe even a 1,000-pound block? Even like 3 or 4 tons pound blocks. That would start becoming a problem with our current technology, especially in the sand, and especially if you got to stack them. Okay? But the ancient Egyptian or whoever 10,000 years ago built this didn't remove a 100-pound block. They removed 200 tons block. And we know that they were removed from the enclosure because the stratification of the layers of rock matches where they were removed from, and you can actually tell which rock came from exactly where in the enclosure. 200 tons. See, this is a little person here. See what I mean? It's not trivial. You don't just grab a 200-ton block with your buddies and move it over there. The current we actually at this time lift about 200 tons with the largest land crane on earth. And we move it only from a truck bed into a boat. We can't roll with it. We can't go and like move it around the sand, and certainly we can't stack them on top of each other to make a temple. 10,000 years ago, somebody was moving 200-ton block with ease. I think this is fantastic. You know, because this is about our true history. This is about what happened on this planet prior to our current history, prior to our current thinking. Look at this statue. Ramses II. When they found this statue, it was laying like this. It had fallen over in the desert. It's made out of pink granite. It's perfectly polished with copper tools. And this is a person beside it. The statue itself, when they found it, they said, "Oh, let's just move it over there because we're going to build the Ramses Museum." So the engineers came and they said, "Well, okay, but then we'll have to cut it in pieces because this thing is approximately 1,000-ton solid block of granite. 1,000 ton. That is 5 times more than what we can lift today with a land crane. So instead they built a museum around it. Much easier. This is not the only 1,000-ton block that was found. You know the pillars on each side of the entrance of temples in Egypt, they are called obelisks. Many of them were in excess of 1,000 tons. And they all come out, all these large objects come out of a quarry that we know where it is. It's hundreds of miles up the Nile. And the quarry is on the other side of the Nile over a mountain range. Okay? When you ask archaeologists, how did this get there? They say, they cut a trench from the Nile across the mountain range into the quarry. And then they let the water in, and then they picked up the object, they stuck it on a barge, and they floated it down the Nile. But there's no evidence of that trench ever being cut. How do you lift up a 1,000-ton object and put it on a barge without sinking it? I mean, that is just not appropriate.